Hey, what's up everyone? Adam here with brahwegotthis, and today I want to talk about passives in ESO. These are things that people tend to skip when it comes to learning about the game, and so I thought it would be good to go over why passives are important, an overview of individual skill lines passives, what passives to look out for when building or leveling your character, what priority to use your precious skill points into for your passives, and why passives are just as important, if not more important, than getting armor when first starting out in the Elder Scrolls Online. Before we get started, I do want to mention I do stream Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday on twitch.tv/brahwegotthis at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you ever want to watch me play live, you can come by and hang out and just have a good time. Also, if you want to join our growing community, make sure to join the Discord in our second guild. And I finally launched my Patreon, so if you want to check out some of the cool benefits of that Patreon, you can check out the link in the description as well as the Twitch and the Discord link there as well. So timestamps will be in the description if you want to skip to certain parts, but I will say that there is important information in each section that will help you better understand certain points I make in this video. But first, why are passives important? That is a pretty loaded question when it comes down to it, but honestly, passives are something that I think a lot of new players overlook when they start playing the game. And the reason is there's a lot of wordage used in some of them, and beginners might not even understand what some terms are on a passive, and they aren't as sexy as a skill, because if you put a skill point into an awesome new skill that you see a description of and you're like, yeah, this is awesome, I'm lighting zombies on fire, you know, you're not going to want to pick that passive over something cool like that, right? But passives shouldn't be overlooked. Individual passives may not seem like they matter, but in the grand scheme of things, when you start to stack passives and you have other group members with you, they make a huge difference. Now, something that I say in my beginner guides is don't worry about using your skill points in your passive trees when you first start out. And you might be like, well, you just told us they're important. They are important. The reason I say that, though, is when you are below level 50 and just starting out in your first character, these aren't going to be something that alter your play drastically. You have more important things to think about, like learning how your skills work. Do you like the class you're playing? Do you want to do crafting? And understanding overall mechanics of the game. And if you are putting some of your scarce skill points into passives, then you don't get to try out those kind of things. You don't get to try out a skill that you're like, oh, that skill is pretty cool, or like, I like this skill. So my goal is to show you that in the early game, these aren't necessary for new players, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't be aware of them and understand how they work together. Because when you hit level 50, I think that is a safe time to start putting your points into your passives. Because if you've made it to 50 on your first character, you probably enjoyed it somewhat and will commit to playing that character more. And you will need these passives, and you should be working towards these passives by the time you hit CP 160. Because these are going to be important for the end game, and you need to understand how they work, because you can really waste some skill points sometimes on passives that don't really matter and don't really affect your build at all. And some of these are really, really beneficial. The other reasons why passives are important are they increase a lot of things that you don't see or think about sometimes, because like I said, again, they aren't sexy, but they help and they're needed. These passives can range from increasing your overall damage done, critical hit damage, spell penetration, reduction of resources when you use your skills. So like if you use a Magicka skill, it would reduce it by 10%, maybe 15% versus the full cost of the skill, which is huge for sustain when you get to the end game. It has increased resource recovery, like faster stamina or Magicka recovery. You get increased healing done. You get increased overall health, Magicka, and stamina pools, and much, much more. These make a difference when you get to end-game content. I'm going to outline a lot of these too in the next sections of the video. So I want to go into the skill line passives first. I'm going to kind of go through each little subgroup and kind of show you a little bit of them. I'm not going to be able to go through every single class. I will be having a race guide that is showing how certain races are better for certain builds in the game or certain roles like healer, tank, DPS. So that will be coming out hopefully soon. But the class guide, I actually already have a class guide. You guys can check that out in the description. I'm on my main account here. I'm on my Dragonite, and you see you have your 3 class abilities, right? And so these skills, you know, obviously are important for my build, but I want to take a look at a few of these and show you why passives are just so important. So if you look in the Art and Flame, it says increases the damage of your burning and poison status effects by 50%, okay? When you apply a burning to an enemy, you restore 500 magicka. When you apply poison to an enemy, you restore 500 stamina. I want to show you why this skill is so good, okay? This isn't just whenever you use an Ardent Flame ability that has burning attached to it, okay? Like a burning status effect. This is anything. So this could be like your Destruction Staff AoE. So like for like instance, you've got your weapon here, you got your Destruction Staff. So this Wall of Elements, if this is fire, that might have additional burning status effects. It might proc that. That increases this damage as well. It also increases any sort of armor that you get, like any sort of armor effects that can create burning status effects. Right here, Grothdar. When you deal damage, you have 10% chance to create lava pools that swirl around you, dealing 2,189 flame damage to all enemies within 8 meters of you every 1 second for 5 seconds. This can proc a burning status effect. You've got, Burning Spell Weave. This is when you deal damage with a flame damage ability, you have 15% chance to apply the burning status effect, which increases your spell damage. So you can see that there's a chain reaction with these passives. So just this one passive right here, this one passive can increase those things by 50%. The damage, it's insane. So that's why some of these class passives you really have to pay attention to, because that affects not just this class, this little skill tree right here. This affects everything that you have on your character. So keep that in mind. You have Warmth. When you deal direct damage with an Ardent Flame ability, you reduce enemies' movement speed by 30% for 3 seconds. Now, this is something that is only on this tree. So again, whenever you only do damage with these abilities, this will proc. And then World and Ruin increases the damage of your Flame Area of Effect abilities by 6%, decrease the cost of your Stamina Poison abilities by 25%. So again, Flame Area of Effect abilities, that's any Flame Area of Effect abilities. Any. It's not just your class abilities. So that's insane. Now, you will see I have some passives in almost every tree, and the reason I did that is this is my main account, and I have almost, I have a ton of skill points and sky shards, so I've just put points into them because in case I wanted to switch this character around at some point into like a tank or something, I just have the skill points already there in them. But you've got a Draconic Power tree here. This is the increased amount of damage you block by 10%. Elder Dragon Blood. This is something that is the first ability I want to show you that is a slotted passive. So you can see that with this Elder Dragon skill, this is talking about slotted abilities. That means that this first part of the skill, okay, you increase your health recovery by 5% for each of these abilities that are slotted. So if you have all 6 of these abilities slotted, it's going to be 5 times 6, it's going to be 30%. I don't have any of these abilities slotted because I don't use them in my build. But the reason that I have this passive active is because it says increases the range of your melee attacks by 2 meters. This effect only applies to instant cast attacks with a 5-meter range. So it can increase some of my, skills, range. It can help me basically not have to be right up on the boss. So this is a skill that has dual abilities that you don't even really worry about the top part unless you need it, but you have the bottom part that is also a second ability. So you have to pay attention to that kind of stuff. Then you have the Earthen Heart. You have Eternal Mountain. Increase the duration of your Earthen Heart abilities. So this is the first ability that increases the overall duration of your skills. So only these abilities will be increased by 20% time. Mountain's Blessing. When you cast an Earthen Heart ability, you and your group gain minor brutality for 20 seconds, increasing weapon damage by 10%. If you're in combat, this also generates 3 ultimate. This effect can occur every 6 seconds. That top part is an amazing ability because every time I activate Eruption every 18 seconds, I'm giving my team minor brutality for 20 seconds, which increases your weapon damage by 10% for the whole group. That's amazing. I mean, that's depending on, the group that you're in, that can be really, really beneficial. But basically what I wanted to show you there in those class skill passives are you have skills that increase in duration of the actual skill lines. You have passives that increase overall damage for certain types of effects, like flame effects. You have passives there that when they're slotted on your bar have an effect, or just have a passive effect already, or like a static effect that you don't even have to do anything for. So you need to try to be mindful of those things when you're putting your points into your skill lines. And I'm going to go into a little bit more of what to prioritize, in my opinion, when it comes to your skill points a little later in the video. and some ones that just to look out for that just aren't really that beneficial. The next thing I want to go into is the weapon passive lines. I'm not going to go into every single one of these. I just want to make a few points when it comes to the passive. Weapon passives are very important to pay attention to, especially stamina ones in my opinion, but magical ones as well. But stamina, there's some things that people don't understand about these, and I want to explain this to you by first starting out with like two-hand, okay? Two-hand has, 5 passive just like every other line, and I also want to go into dual wield a little bit as well. Now again, I'm not going to go into every single one of these, but something I want to pay attention to in each of these weapon lines is this thing right here. So for two-hand, you have heavy weapons. With a two-handed weapon equipped, this grants a bonus based off the type of weapon equipped, okay? A lot of people don't realize that, you can equip a greatsword, a battle axe, and a, basically like a maul, okay, when you have two hands. When you have that equipped, they have different bonuses when you have this passive activated, and that's why it's important to know that, okay? Great swords increase your damage done by 2%. Now that will go up some when you put points into that. Axes grant, this is like great axes, two-handed, okay? Axes grant your melee attacks an 8% chance to bleed, apply a bleed, dealing 4,938 physical damage over 6 seconds. And maces cause your attacks to ignore 10% of your target's physical resistance. Now, I will go ahead and tell you that the maul or the maces are not that important for PvE. Swords are not even that great either for that. The axe is so good for two-handed because it applies a bleed. It's a damage over time. It has an 8% chance to do that. That's why you need to pay attention to which weapon you're using and what passives you put into these, okay? Now, the other thing, I'll go to dual wield. This is another example. You've got, I'm going to go through a few of these. So this one is increased damage of dual wield abilities by 10% against enemies with under 25% health. That's amazing because when you're in execution phase and they're under 25% health, you're going to do an additional 10%. That's a lot of damage, guys. That's a lot of damage. The other one increases weapon damage by 3% of an offhand weapon damage. This one is still needed. This one is reduces the stamina cost of dual wield abilities by 7%. This is our first basically reduce cost ability that I was talking about. 7% is great, okay? That means that every time you do your rotation, you're going to do an ability that's a dual wield ability, and it's going to be 7% reduction. That's going to save your resources tremendously. So that's important. This one, Ruffian, gives you an 8% damage bonus when attacking stunned, immobilized, disoriented, or silenced enemies. That is going to happen a lot because there's going to be a lot of people laying down Wall of Elements and other abilities that will stun, immobilize, disorient, or silence them. So you're going to have an 8% damage bonus if you have this equipped. And then this is the important one on here, Twin Blade and Blunt. Each axe gives your melee attacks a 4% chance to apply a bleed. Each mace causes your attacks to ignore 5% of enemies' physical resistance. Each sword increases your damage done by 1%. Each dagger increases your weapon critical rating. Okay, so the 2 or 3 that I think are pretty solid here are the axe, the sword, and the dagger. So for dual wield, I think the best in slot stuff right now is like axe sword or axe dagger. Destruction staff line's another great one though to look at. Trifocus. When you do a fully charged flame heavy attack, you deal 12% additional damage. Shock staff heavy attacks damage nearby enemies 100% of the damage done. Fully charged frost staffs taunt the enemy for 15 seconds. So that's another thing that's great for a tank. Elemental Force increases the chance to apply burning, concussion, and shield status effects by 100%. You've got the Ancient Knowledge. So equipping a flame staff increases your damage done with single target abilities by 8%. Okay, 8%. Equipping a flame staff increases your damage done with single target abilities by 8%. That increases all your single target abilities on your skill bar. Equipping a lightning staff increases your damage done with area of effect abilities by 8%. So if you've got an area of effect build, it increases all of those by 8%. Equipping a frost staff reduces the cost of blocking by 36% and increases the amount of damage you block by 20%. Again, great for tanks. Then you have Destruction Expert. When you kill an enemy with Destruction Staff ability, you restore 3,600 Magicka. So those are the weapon ones I want to go over, and I wanted to show you basically why it's important to look at those individually. Because if you're on dual wield and you've got 2 maces, equipped, and you apply this passive, that's not really going to do that much. And so that's why you want to pay attention to that, plus the passives that you have the actual points into. Now, when it comes to like world passives and stuff, you've got your excavation, you got your scrying. Those are things that are just completely different. If you want to check out my antiquities guide, I have that in the description for you guys as well if you want to learn anything about that. You have legerdemain, which is basically stealing stuff and just sort of things like that. That doesn't really matter when it comes to PvE. You've got soul magic. You don't really need these passives. They're helpful, but you don't really need them. And vampire is only going to be something that you really need if you have this in your build. There'll be a few passives that you could look at there. Then I want to jump to crafting passives. The crafting passives that are important for PvE that you need to look out for are medicinal use. This is when using potions, results effects last 30% longer. So you get, that's a lot longer. So if you use a potion, it's gonna be 30% longer. It's really solid. With provisioning, it's gourmand adds 20% or 20 minutes to the duration of any eaten food, and then connoisseur is add 20 minutes to the duration of any consumed drink. These are great passives to have if you don't want to do crafting and you don't want to put a lot of points in these. I would recommend getting these passives at least in the crafting lines. When it comes to armor, armor is also something that people don't understand that has a pretty big effect. And this is why one of my biggest tips, again, when you first start out playing the game, I put these in all my beginner guides, is always try to equip a little bit of each armor, but majority of the armor that you're going to use in your build. The reason you do this is you want to level these lines up eventually. But the reason I tell people to level up all these lines when they level to 50 is because when you get to the end game, it actually does matter somewhat if you can have some of these passives. Because for Magicka characters, a lot of times you're going to be equipping about 5 pieces of light armor, 1 pieces of medium armor. So right now I have a light and I've got to get a medium of this, and then a heavy helmet a lot of times. That's usually what, you know, Magicka characters do. And the reason they do that is for many reasons. And the first reason is because they want the passes of these lines, and then they want a passive in the Undaunted line, which we'll go over here in a second. But you'll see that these are really solid. So if you're, you know, a light armor character, you've got, you know, grace, you've got evocation, you've got spell warding, you've got prodigy, and you've got concentration. These last two are, it says when 5 or more pieces of light armor are equipped, increase your spell critical rating by 2191. That's amazing. Increase your spell penetration by 4884. Again, that's amazing. When you get to the heavy armor, obviously I'm not going to have these, right? I just have these points into these, again, because in case I want to change to a tank or something like that. But some of these other ones are helpful, and they do stack, okay? Like they do help in some way. So increase your physical and spell resistance by 362 for each piece of heavy armor equipped. I don't have a lot, but it helps a little bit. Increase your spell health recovery by 4% for each piece of heavy armor equipped. Right now, our current bonus is 4. You also restore 108 magicka and stamina when you take damage for each piece of heavy armor equipped. It's going to occur every 4 seconds. Again, this is not a lot, but it helps with all the other little passives that you are getting. Juggernaut, increase your max health by 2% for each piece of heavy armor equipped, 2%. That's still 2%, guys. That's still 2%, and you can get more of those bonuses and buffs. Medium armor, I don't have any points into yet because I don't have my medium shoulders. So I want to segue the armor into the guild passives, and the reason I want to do that now is because I want to start off with why guild passives are very important for specific builds, but the one guild passive and the guild passives that you should always get, no matter what build you're doing. I don't care if it's a tank, a stamina character, a magicka character, a healer. This skill line, Undaunted, is the most important guild skill line, in my opinion, for passives. And this is the reason, these 2 passive abilities. And yes, you're going to have to level your Undaunted up. Again, I have an Undaunted beginner guide in the description if you guys want to check that out. But I want to draw your attention to 2 of these passives. This one right here, Undaunted Command. Activating an ally's synergy restores 4% of your max health, stamina, and magicka. Current bonus is 485 health, 394 stamina, and 1354 magicka. These are important, okay? Anytime you activate a synergy, anytime you're going to restore 4% of your resources. That's huge, okay? That's huge. You need this passive eventually. Again, eventually. This is the other one, though, why armor is important, because this is something that people don't, they get this misconstrued and they think it means something else. Increase your max health, stamina, and magicka by 2% per type of armor, heavy, medium, light, that you have equipped. So that means that if you have 1 piece of heavy, 1 piece of medium, and 5 pieces of light, you will get a 6% bonus. Okay? 6%. It's not per amount of each type. It's per type of armor. So if you have 3 types on, you're going to get 6%. If you have 2 types on, you're going to get 4%. If you have 1 type on, you're going to get 2%. If you can get this to 6%, that increases your max health, stamina, and magicka by 6%. That's amazing. Some builds only use all medium, okay? Some builds might use all light, but for the most part, you're gonna have a heavy, light, and a medium in there a lot of times, okay? You just are. And a lot of times it's because of this passive. This is a 6% bonus. That's huge. Okay, you couple that with your other bonus in the armor tree for heavy armor, you're now at an 8% bonus of health just by wearing 1 piece of heavy armor, guys. Just by wearing 1 piece of heavy armor, you're at an 8% bonus of max health, and you're doing nothing but wearing 1 piece of heavy armor. So that is why these passives in the guilds and armor passives are important, okay? They're very important. Now we have the other guilds. Dark Brotherhood's very specific. This is just other types of things, not really for PvE. Fighters Guild's important if you've got certain abilities. So like Slayer, you know, increase your weapon damage by 3% for each fighter guild ability slotted. A lot of times they'll run Barb Trap, Dawnbreaker. That'll be a huge buff, so you want that in there. Banished Wicked, you generate 3 ultimate when you kill Undead, Daedra, or Werewolf. You get Fighters Guild abilities, deal an additional 20% damage to Undead, Daedra, and Werewolves. That's also another solid thing to have in my opinion. When it comes to Mages Guild, depending on if you have like Degeneration or Inner Light or Shooting Star, sometimes Spell Symmetry, you can use, you know, Everlasting Magic. You can do Magicka Controller, which is, again, a slotted thing. So if you have all those abilities slotted, you're going to increase that more and more. And then Might of the Guild is something solid, too, if you're going to be using Degeneration a lot. Psijic Order, again, is dependent on if you have this in your build. And Thieves Guild is not really PvE specific. It's just like a world thing. Now, for racial passives, guys, this is something that you're basically going to put all your skill points into basically all of these when you make your character, for the most part. Because if you're using a certain race, they're usually going to have some sort of benefit that you just shouldn't not put your points into for your skill. I'm not going to go into every single racial passive thing because, again, I'm going to make a race guide and we're going to go all into that. But these are important, okay? If you're choosing a certain race for a build, they're usually a race for a certain reason because they've got good passives in their racial line. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about passives to look out for when building or leveling your character and the priority of how you should use them when you've got your skill points available. And so those are going to be kind of coupled together. And so obviously some priority of passives, in my opinion, for your skill points are anything that reduces the cost of abilities. If you've got something that can reduce the cost of abilities, that's amazing, okay? So those are usually typical things that you're going to want in your build. Anything that gives you resource recovery, so increased stamina recovery, increased magic recovery, increased health recovery, those are usually passives that, again, are going to be solid to have in your build. Global damage, things like combustion, like I told you, increases the damage of your burning and poison stat effects by 50%. This is something that's going to help everything in your build. So not just your ardent flame abilities, but things in like your procs from your armor or your other, you know, destruction staff abilities, things like that. Those global type effects, those are important to prioritize. And so things like that aren't important to prioritize, you know, are just certain abilities that you'll have to read in your basically your tree. So for like heavy armor, you know, I'm not usually going to put points into Rapid Mending or Revitalize because I don't have 5 pieces of heavy armor on. The only reason I have points into this, again, is because in case I want to make this, you know, character into a tank. So there's certain abilities that just are not going to apply. If you go to medium armor, improve sneak, reduce the cost of sneak by 4%, reduce the size of your detection area by sneak by 3%. This is not necessarily something you should prioritize your, you know, your points for your medium armor because it's not something that, unless you're just building a character for role playing or something where you want to sneak around or you want to steal a lot of stuff, if you're trying to do it for PvE, this isn't something that's that important. Now, next, the priority in putting your skill points into these different sections of skills, that is something, again, that's going to be based somewhat off of your build or the build that you want to make. But if I had to give you any suggestions, I wouldn't worry too much about the alchemy and provisioning passives that I told you guys about before. I would say that the most important passives to really put your points into once you get above level 50 are your class passives. So the ones that that are useful for your class. So there's going to be some that you really don't need, but the class passives, I would say your weapon passives are important. So destruction staff, if you're using destruction staff or dual wield. And then I would say armor is next, and then the guild and everything like that, because you're not going to have Undaunted at level 10 by level 50. You're just not. So you're not going to be able to have these available then. So really you want to get your class and your weapon stuff in order, and then armor as well. And that leads me into, again, why passives are just as important, if not more important, than getting armor when first starting out. I'm actually going to be doing a video on going over what armor is actually great for you that's not in trials and other sort of things, because a lot of people, when they start out, and I've gotten a lot of feedback from this, a lot of beginners struggle with the fact that they are so worried about getting sets of armor and getting that set that their build has, right? Sets are important, y'all. Sets are important, and they help you out. But if you don't understand some of the basic mechanics of the game, some sets are not going to help you because you're not going to be able to know how to utilize them. And a lot of those sets are trial sets. A lot of trial sets are in-game best-in-slot builds, and that's because they're there for the meta best-in-slot. This is what you can use. But if you don't know how to use that set, it's not going to be as beneficial to you as, say, another set that might be easier to use. So passives, the reason why passives come up in this is because if I had to give you guys any tip that you could take away from this video is when you hit level 50, y'all, don't worry about getting your sets yet, because again, you don't need to get your sets until 160 CP because the gear cap's at 160 CP. I want you guys to focus on getting skill points, enjoying the game, learning your class, learning the mechanics, and then utilizing those skill points to put them into passives, because I would rather you guys not grind to CP 160 to get that gear set, because say you grind to CP 160 and you have no skill points and you have you have like barely any of your passives in these, and you have barely any of your passives in your destruction staff line, and you don't have passives in your armor lines. That's going to significantly drop your performance just right off the bat, okay? The set is not going to make up for that necessarily. If I had to give you one tip from this video is try to focus on playing the game, enjoying it to level 50, okay? Trying to figure out if you like your class, trying to learn the mechanics, quest, get skill points, enjoy the game. And then once you hit level 50, that's when you really need to start putting maybe some points into your passives. You can put some in before that if you want, but again, if it's not going to be your main character, or if you don't want to grind skill points or do quests, you're going to be hurting for skill points, okay? But when you hit 50, that's when you really need to start focusing on those skill points. And then once you get those figured out, then worry about armor when you get to 160 and beyond. But that is why I think passives are just so important, and almost more important than armor for beginners, because you need to learn and understand what they do and how they work and why they actually help you out so much. But that's going to wrap up the video, guys. I hope that you guys enjoyed this. Again, I know this is something that might be not as fun to learn about, but it is something that is very important. And I really hope you guys took something out of this and it can maybe help benefit you later on in the game. And maybe you learned something that you didn't know, and you're like, wow, Adam, I didn't know that that's actually why that they're important. So again, if you ever want to come by the Twitch chat, I stream on twitch.tv/brahwegotthis Monday, Tuesday, Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can always ask questions there, guys. Hang out, come by, say hey to me. The link is in the description. Again, I have my Patreon up now as well. The link is in the description there. And you can join our Discord and our second guild. The link to the Discord is in the description. And if you like this content, make sure to like, subscribe, share, and heavy attack that bell icon to stay up to date on all the new content coming up and the giveaways and all sorts of things that I do in the channel. And remember, guys and gals, just to have faith, be great, and I'll see you guys on ESO.